Dear listeners, welcome to another episode of South Asia Chat, brought to you by the Institute of South Asian Studies at the National University of Singapore. In this episode, we'll be talking about recent developments in the Intra-Afghan peace talks, the rocky road so far, and what lies ahead. Today we have with us Dr. Iftekhar Chowdhury, Principal Research Fellow and Research Lead for Multilateral and International Linkages. Dr. Chowdhury, welcome to this podcast series.
Thank you very much, John.
So first, could you paint a broad picture by telling us about the terms of the U.S.-Taliban peace agreement and the likelihood of whether these terms will be honored?
Okay, so this is the agreement of 29th of February, Doha. This was, of course, as you are aware, between the Taliban and the United States. And the Kabul government was not a part of this negotiations. There are several pillars to this. There were several pillars to those negotiations. Number one was that the Afghan territory would not be used by Taliban-occupied territory would not be used by any other extremists working against the interests of the United States and their allies. Secondly, the United States troops numbering 12,000 would be involved, would be withdrawn in phases lasting over 14 months, and it is not necessarily predicated on a permanent peace agreement thereafter. Thirdly, it was that the Kabul government would release 5,000 prisoners, and in return, the Afghans would release 1,000. Also, the Afghans, the Taliban who were placed on the sanctions list, U.S. and UN sanctions list, the names would be removed. So, all told, it was very advantageous to the Taliban. The Kabul government was not party to it, of course, but was indirectly made a party by the United States, because very quickly the U.S. went to the UN Security Council and had a Security Council resolution adopted. So, by implication, the Afghan government became involved because the Security Council resolution is mandatory for everyone.
And so there's the way that the negotiations unfolded are interesting because we have the U.S. on the one side, Taliban on the other, and then we have, like you said, the Afghan government, which was kind of outside of the talks until we had the U.S. go to the UN. What do you think the Taliban is thinking about the entire negotiation prospects for its own interests? I mean, in some ways it kind of seems like the Taliban has the stronger hand. Does the Taliban want to be recognized now by the UN and by these international bodies as a legitimate force? What is the role of the violence that they've been using as the talks have kind of gone on now?
Okay, I mean, were I the Taliban, if I were Taliban, what would I want of it? Okay, my first perceived self-interest would be an American withdrawal. My idea would be if the Americans leave, I could sort out the Afghans, the Afghan Kabul government. The Taliban have the military wherewithal to do that. Of course, as you are aware that these negotiations have been compared to I don't know if you recall those the negotiations between the Viet Cong and the Americans in Paris, Harriman and Tway. Anyway, you see, the Americans wanted a troops withdrawal, a face-saving retreat from Afghanistan, the withdrawal was a commitment of Donald Trump, President Donald Trump. The Americans have lost around 1,400, I think, troops in this. They have invested nearly $2 trillion of financial investment, I say, or loss or whatever, but $2 trillion involvement. So they want out. The Taliban wants them out, but the treaty or the agreement in Doha was a face-saving device for both the Americans and the Talibans to obtain what was in their own perceived interests.
And there's a dephasing of troops, or I guess a phase down of troops, and this will have implications depending on what Americans are left with a security role, because it seems to a certain degree a lot of the legitimacy of the Afghanistan government to enter into negotiations or have credibility behind their talks with the Taliban relies to a certain extent on the security presence there.
You see, okay, what the, it's almost mathematical. What the Taliban is looking to is with every phased withdrawal, there will be an incremental power to the Taliban. They are already gathering around Kabul, by the way. You talk to the violence. Yes, the violence which they would call war is a part of the strategy, because the violence or call it war or violence is to demonstrate to the government and to the people of Afghanistan that the time is not very far off that they will be in control. If you ask me, of course, they're exhausted, as everyone else is. This has been a forever war going on for 40 years. But they see themselves as having come very close to the prize. In my view, I don't think they are in a position to want to compromise the ultimate goal of establishing the emirate. Why would they want to do it now? I mean, they smell victory. The Americans are leaving. Even if they are in control, the only losers would be the Afghan government, because it is theoretically or even practically possible to see an outcome where the Taliban in government in Kabul would have good working relations with the United States. You see, they will probably have good relations with Pakistan as well, China. So you see, the constellation of forces globally, they have nothing to fear from. You see, the only thing that stands in the way is the government in Kabul. The government in Kabul is deeply divided. You have, it's like Sparta with two kings, you see. You have the president who's challenged by Abdulla, the rival. And the Americans have, of course, sought to bridge these intra-Afghan differences in order to facilitate the intra-Afghan talks with the Taliban. So much so that given the global situation now with the virus and all that sort of thing, Mike Pompeo, the American Secretary of State, flew on the 23rd of March, I think, to talk to the government. He was deeply disappointed by what he had seen, of course. He threatened to withdraw $1 billion of the U.S. aid, to which much needed U.S. financial assistance to the government for this year, and if the problems are not resolved, next year as well. So the talks that we began to talk about initially have been seen as something like a emperor with no clothes moment, you see, as far as the government is concerned. Now, the negotiations with regard to the prisoner exchange, which is probably more important in practical terms to the Taliban, is already taking place. Initially, I understand that there was a larger team of 10 to have come, or 3 came, but that was not a problem. The talks have already begun. So the more substantive, practical negotiations are already taking place. To what extent the negotiations would be, what I'm going to say is a bit radical. You see, normally one would have thought that the Taliban would be very, very concerned about these negotiations and all that because they want power sharing. My view is that it's not power sharing they want. They want to govern Afghanistan in its entirety. So the ultimate goal is governing Afghanistan. Is power sharing is a means of getting there. It will probably be there, but the situation has been further exacerbated by the coronavirus. Of course, there are not too many testings in Afghanistan, but already they talk about of 200 infections, 4 dead, etc.
But to get to the governing point, I would suppose that there would be 2 routes. One of them would be through negotiations, enter into a power sharing arrangement, and then from there use a certain amount of heft to work your way to the top. And then a second, I guess, would be to not concede to demands and negotiations, to continue violence and wait for the government to capitulate and give you a better offer. I suppose that's still a type of negotiation, but it seems like one is based on, what is being exchanged, the principle is a structure, and then the second is maybe based more on, what can you force another body to do.
That is true as to, what they, as I said, they don't want to compromise their ultimate goal, which is to establish an emirate. So in order to get there, if they are to get there in phases, like the first phase would be power sharing with the present government, and the next phase would be they coming into control. But that would only push the ultimate into the almost unknown future. Right now, I think a couple of years ago, or maybe about 3 years ago, 3 of us, Javed Berke and Riaz Hassan and myself, we've done a book called Afghanistan, the Next Phase. Taking into view the possibility that a time might come that the Taliban may be poised to take control. In order to ensure that should Taliban come into government in Afghanistan, it is the responsibility of the international community to ensure that certain acceptable, universal, global values are acceptable to the Taliban as well. To my mind, it is possible. It is possible. Difficult, but it is possible. In other words, I'd be very concerned about things like women's rights, human rights, etc. Now, where I come from, Bangladesh, and you're aware that I was formerly foreign minister in Bangladesh, we have the largest NGO in the world called BRAC, which is dedicated to microcredit, non-formal education for women, etc., present in a very large way in Afghanistan. The information that I have is that in principle, the Taliban have not opposed the role of BRAC in the regions. So I see the Taliban as being a little more realistic over the years, and they have developed the capacity. Not by no means will there be a modern, government or anything like that, but a chastened, non-secular government, which would probably accept some of these values, which the international community must continue pressuring them to. So that's the point. It's going to be a very complex situation. You see, you have these people coming into power. They will try to show themselves as responsible and acceptable to the international community. In order to do that, I think it is the responsibility of the international community, working through the United Nations and to a certain extent through the United States and Pakistan, to ensure that some of the values that we believe the Afghan population have already accepted is also become a part of the Afghan lifestyle.
So we only have one final question, and in some ways you kind of touched upon this in different parts of your answer. this being the Institute of South Asian Studies, the Taliban coming into power or potentially entering into some sort of power-sharing arrangement will have a likely effect on the rest of South Asia. You have a new relationship between the Taliban and Pakistan. I would assume that there would be a new relationship between the Taliban and India also. There's been talk of possible hardline fighters for the Taliban disaffecting in this new government and perhaps joining ISIS or Al-Qaeda. What do you foresee in the near future in a sort of regional perspective?
Okay. You see, the Afghan society is a very complex one. There are certain values, and we talked of values a little earlier, which are shared by everyone, every Afghan. I have myself served on the borders of Afghanistan. I've been a part of the frontier government in 1970, frontier in Pakistan. The Afghan lifestyle centered around three principal values: honor, hospitality, and revenge. This is shared by all, whether you are Taliban or ISIL Khorasan. The ISIL that's present in ISIS in Afghanistan is called the Afghan ISIL Khorasan component. They are, of course, more radical than the Taliban. I see a sort of a alignment of forces between the Taliban and Pakistan or whatever against ISIL Khorasan. That would be to Pakistan's advantage, because for long Pakistan has had a problem with Afghanistan with regard to the borders. As you know, the borders are fenced. Pakistan thinks that if there is a Taliban government in Kabul or Taliban-dominated government in Kabul, there'll be better working relations between the two. The borders would be recognized. Pakistan would also be anxious to get the 1 million or so Afghans in Pakistan, still in Pakistan, go back to, return to Afghanistan. Also Iran. Iran has about 3 million or so refugees now. Already every day, I'm told, thousands are returning to Afghanistan. This is a bit of a problem with regard to the coronavirus, by the way. That exacerbates that situation. So these refugees will go back. If there's a working relationship between Kabul, Islamabad, Washington, it's a good thing. India is not a direct neighbor, but India has investments. Ideally, I would have liked, you talked of ISIS. India, Pakistan, there is a window and opportunity of working, of Pakistan. If somewhere Pakistan can sort of not assure, but facilitate India to protect its investments. It's a difficult thing because these are linked to many other issues, Kashmir, Indo-Pak relations. But I think there's a window of opportunity in cooperating. Whether the political leaderships will take advantage of that or not, I do not know. But the relations between, I think, Pakistan and Afghanistan will obviously change. The Americans possibly will accept either a power-sharing government, naturally, because that is politically acceptable to Americans even now, or thereafter a government which is probably dominated by the Afghans could be acceptable to the Americans. The Chinese will be interested in protecting their very large investments in Pakistan and Afghanistan, of course. So you see, in the book that I just spoke of, with Javed Barki, myself, and Riaz Hassan, we had suggested a small group of international, not eminent persons, but countries, involved countries, some kind of an informal open-ended group of these countries under the aegis of the Security Council of the United Nations, operating in a way, in an advisory capacity to the Afghan government. That would be a very nice paradigm. I mean, of course, the sovereignty of Afghanistan would be fully respected, but there would not be a total disengagement of the international community from Afghanistan. The Security Council, in a very broad way, with the assent of the Afghan government, would have a group of countries which would be their advisors. These countries with stakes in Afghanistan and stakes in the stability in Afghanistan. I'm not suggesting that they'll just protect their own investments. Their investments are stakes in Afghanistan, and Afghanistan, Kabul government should also, frankly, have stakes in these. They would want ideally, the Chinese investments, the Indian investments, and the American investments, which will probably continue, because there would be, as in the case of Vietnam, as we have seen, I foresee an American involvement in the region, because the Americans would not be politically in a position to withdraw from that. That area is too critical to American interest.
Well, thank you, Dr. Chowdhury, for discussing this very important issue with us. And as you pointed out, Afghanistan is interlinked with many different things, and so I expect that there will be many different windows and paradigms to look at how things evolve as we progress and continue. Dear listeners, this is John Vaughter, a research associate at ISAS. If you are interested in learning more about Dr. Chowdhury's work or following our analyses of South Asian politics, please visit our official webpage, isas.nus.edu.sg, for the latest insights and updates. We hope you have enjoyed this session. We look forward to joining you again soon for the next episode of South Asia Chat.
Thank you.
Thank you.